Welcome to Life Choices. Thank you for joining us today. We have another great episode for you. My interview today is with Eric Granger, and he's a very exciting man. He is a screenwriter, he's been a playwright, he's been a book writer. He writes all kinds of things. Eric, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
It's such a pleasure to have you here today, and especially because when I looked at your resume, you must have won 100 awards. You've got 40 of these finalist awards and these 10 Best Screenplay Awards and whatever. So tell us a little bit about you and how you made the choice to get into screenwriting.
Wow.
And I want to know about all your choices in life.
All my choices. There's been several zigs and zags in my life. And a few years ago, at the time I was managing the art center in Lake Placid, New York. And someone came to me and asked me to write a play for the art center. It was actually a fundraiser play. And I thought it would be kind of fun. So I put together some crazy characters and we did a live performance of this particular play that we did, and it was incredibly well received, and I was asked to write more and more plays. And so I really enjoy inventing something in my head and watching other people perform it. It's an incredible kick to get that. And so I was telling one of my sisters about this. She didn't get to attend, but she says, well, you've always been the storyteller in our family anyway. You always have something to say. Whenever we get together at Thanksgiving, we always like to listen to your stories. And my sister said, you should write a book about all your stories and the things you've done. So I sat on that for a while. This was a good 20 years ago. And so I said, you know what, I think I will. Just write down some stories that my life's experiences, starting actually when I was about 7 or 8 years old, telling some of those stories. And I put together a book, and I decided to put it on Kindle, which is still out there in the world for people who want to read a bunch of short stories.
What's the name of the book?
It's called One Baby Boomer's Journey.
Ah.
Yeah, it's because I was born, I'm a thoroughbred, certified, card-carrying baby boomer. I was born in '51. Right. And so I had other siblings around that same area. We're all pretty close. Anyway, so I put together this book of short stories, and a few people read that and just absolutely loved it. And they said, this is what you should be doing. You should be writing stories. So I said, well, I've always had this idea for a movie, because I know that everybody at home knows that they can write a movie, and then they can write one better than some of the stuff that they see. Yeah. And I was definitely in that club. I said, oh, I can do better than that. So I decided to write my first screenplay, but I didn't know anything about writing screenplays. It's a totally different animal than even writing for the stage.
Yes.
And I'd done a lot of stage work. I directed shows. I directed musicals. I'd done a lot of stuff on the stage, but it's a different animal. So I decided to take some classes, and I drove down to New York City and took some classes on writing screenplays, and I learned an awful lot from that. And then I signed up for some master classes and from people like Aaron Sorkin and some of the bigger playwrights.
Yes,
Screenwriters, that to learn the technique, but how you write and how you tell a story and the best way to tell a story. So I decided to write one, and I wrote one. It was kind of a romantic adventure story, I guess in the genre of a Romancing the Stone kind of thing.
Yes.
There's adventure, and there's a girl and a guy, and that sort of thing. And I wrote my first one. And then I didn't know what to do with it. So I said, okay. And I decided the best way to find out if I'm any good is to let other people judge me. That's a pretty tough thing to do.
Oh, that's hard.
It's very hard. It's like, oh, 1 minute they're going to hate me, and they're going to think I'm an amateur, and the next minute they're going to say, oh, this, that, and the other. And I got feedback from relatives and friends, but they're not professional.
Yeah, we never think they really know.
No.
They don't know what they're talking about.
And they always say, oh, we loved it, blah, 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 that sort of thing. So I wanted to finally get a professional opinion on my writing. And I started submitting to many different screenplay contests that are out there. Okay, I'll try and just see what people say about me. And I'll never forget the first one that I got back, it was rejected. And I said, okay, all right, but I had submitted to maybe 4 or 5 at the same time. So the second response I got back was, oh, you're accepted in the festival, and you're in the top 25% or something to that effect. It's like, oh, well, that's not too bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got one back that said I was a finalist, and my screenplay had become a finalist in their screenplay. So it's like, oh, well, wait a minute now. So I joined a couple of online writers clubs. Basically, there's International Screenwriters Association and a few others, and got to talk with a lot of different other writers and get different opinions about it. And one thing that I learned is it's so subjective. That one person may hate it, and the person sitting right beside them may absolutely think it's the Oscar winner of next year.
Yeah.
And that happens out there. So don't get down if someone doesn't like it, kind of thing. So then I thought, I wrote a second screenplay. I said, well, that's kind of neat now, but I know a little bit more about technique and a little bit more about what people want and a little bit better about telling story itself. So I said, I'm going to enter one of the big contests. So I entered the Beverly Hills Film Festival with my second screenplay, and I said, "This is really going to," kind of nervously, but I want to know. I really have to know from me if. And my first response from them was, "Your screenplay is a finalist in the Beverly Hills." This is my second screenplay.
Amazing.
It's like, okay, now I got a little bit more feedback. And at that same time, I had submitted to another one in Los Angeles. It was called the Topanga, which is an area right outside of LA, up in that area. And it's kind of an artsy community up in that area. And I got back word from them that I had won first place in their screenplay contest.
Whoa.
And now I'm going, maybe I do have some talent in this area about telling stories. So I started going to a lot of film festivals because I decided, when you're talking about choices, I decided at this time I was no longer a spring chicken. And so I had worked a pretty hard life in really many, many different areas. And I had to sit down and think for a while, what is my real talent that I have? That my real talent? And it's telling stories. I finally admitted to myself that's where my talent lies, is how to tell a story and how to hold a suspense and when to let it go and when not to let it go and when to add the subplot to just complicate things, that sort of thing. And so I decided that this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a screenwriter, and I was already close to 60 years old. And I said, but this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do with my life, no matter what it takes. I started going to every film festival I could, investing, because it's not cheap to.
No, it's not.
For me to, I live in New York, so it's not cheap for me to fly to LA and back just to attend a festival, which costs money in itself, or down to Oaxaca, Mexico, or up to Montreal. But I decided it's kind of like if I decided to become a lawyer. I would have to spend a lot of money
Going to school.
And the education involved in that. So I considered it an investment within myself, as if it were a college education, so to speak. So I put a lot of my hard-earned money that I had into meeting people, going to festivals. I finally learned to not be shy about it. I think the first two festivals I was in the corner. I was the kid out of town in the middle of the big pond kind of thing. But then I said, you know what, if this is what I'm going to do,
I got to get out there.
I got to get out there. So as one of your other guests, Amy Kodachian, will attest to, I just walked right up to her. I didn't know her at that time. And I said, hi, my name is Eric. I'm a screenwriter. And I did that to everywhere I went. Whichever film festival I went to, I would just shamelessly pass out business cards, shamelessly introduce myself to everybody I could. And eventually, it got to the point where I was actually in this town 2 years ago at the Las Vegas Film Festival. Saw a person who was in the producing area, walked right up to her, and I said, hi, my name is Eric Granger. And I did my whole little 5-minute spiel. And she goes, I've heard of you.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, what? She says, yeah, I was talking to another producer at a different event, and he mentioned your name. And so all of a sudden, it's like, hey, that's kind of nice.
I'm getting recognition.
Yeah, that people remembered me, and that's a hard thing in this business. to get remembered, to get recognized. So I continued to write, continued to plaster my screenplays everywhere I could plaster them, and all of a sudden another finalist award, another finalist, another first place, another first place, and I actually took third place at Cannes 3 years ago.
Oh, that's big.
It is out of the thousands of entries that they get. So all of a sudden, I kind of was being recognized and known by people, and I started fielding phone calls from people who said, "Hey, someone told me about you. Can you do this? Can you write a screenplay about this?" That kind of thing. And so that's kind of, when you mentioned the life choices, it was really, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to put my foot on the gas pedal and just plow through it. And especially from so far away from LA, that makes it tougher.
It does.
And
because when you live in the New York area, you think plays. When you live in Los Angeles, you think Hollywood and movies.
Yeah, it's true. And I live 6 hours away from the city in New York. I'm up in the mountains, so I couldn't even get the inroads in my own backyard. So I just skipped over the backyard and went for the Emerald City out here.
Well, that was really smart, wasn't it?
It's turning out to be. It's turning out to be a good thing.
Turning out to be very, very good. Now, I understand that you did a story about the struggle with human trafficking. And Amy Kardashian, who was a guest on one of my shows and is the author of Tears of Hope, and a movie that you are now writing, she's had some experience with sexual abuse, and I think right now this is a really timely subject in the United States.
It is. I think maybe starting 5 or 6 years ago, I started getting away from the romantic adventures to more topical heartfelt issues. I did one about a man who was dying of cancer and how he was going to spend his last 3 months of his life. And that was a different way for me to write. And then a few years ago, someone from Nigeria contacted me, and they wanted me to write a screenplay about human trafficking. That's where I was going with that.
From Nigeria?
From Nigeria, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a funny world out there, and who knows the contacts that are out there. So we did some Skype meetings, and she told me, this was a female producer there, she told me what she was after, the message she was trying to get out. And so I worked on that for a long time, several months, and completed it. And it's an interesting story about a young lady who was, she just loved to dance. It was in her blood. And she would go to street carnivals and dance, that sort of thing. And then somebody came along and said, "Oh, you should be," and she fell into the trap of fame and the better life. And actually, she was thrown into human trafficking. And then later he sold her off to some drug lords in Colombia. And that story ends up being about her struggle of her family and friends never giving up trying to find her, and how they finally tracked her down, found her, and brought her back home again. So it's a different kind of stories than I had been telling in the past, something with more of a pertinent and struggling and not always coming out good on the other end.
Right.
It's just because you struggle and you survive doesn't mean it's always good.
Yeah, we lived in Africa, and I understand the sex trafficking situations in many of those countries. It's not good at all.
Yeah.
And Nigeria is one of the worst.
Yeah, and it's still going on over there today.
Yes,
tremendously.
It is.
Yeah, because I talk with folks in Nigeria often now, and we're still. Well, that script is finalized also, and we're working on. But with the situation of the COVID in today, everything's been put on hold. As far as production-wise.
When we get through this period, some of your things are going to take off like wildfire.
I have.
And you did the life story of B.B. King as well.
I did. I just finished writing that for a producer, and it's like a lot of other things. They're sitting in a folder, ready to go, and supposedly one of the Mayer brothers is interested in that.
Great.
One of that in that particular script. I did a lot of research on that one, and it's a phenomenal story in itself of what he went through, with the growing up a poor black boy in Mississippi, and his mother died when he was 6, and then his grandmother took her, and a few years later she died, and he actually lived by himself in one of the shacks and shanties on a cotton farm, and took care of himself, worked himself, fed himself from the age of 10 on. And
Isn't that amazing?
it's a phenomenal story. And
so many people that become super successful, we find they've had very, very hard lives.
Yeah.
And I think the hard life oftentimes builds a lot of character in a person.
Yeah, I honestly believe that, because it's interesting writing a story that didn't come from my own brain for a change.
Yes.
Because when I first started out, it was like imagination stories and what I can come up with here. But like the B.B. King story, the African story, and Amy Kodachian's story, I do a lot of research about that. And I find the exact same thing. It's those people who have not let life beat them down, and somewhere they made the choice, I am not going to be stopped.
Yes.
Those people made that choice, and I've learned a lot from my research about humanity and about people, and I'm really enjoying writing those stories.
I would imagine you would be.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would, I think it's one thing to write fiction, and it's another to write nonfiction. It's a totally different avenue.
It truly is. It truly is. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite fictional character that you?
That I have. That I've come up with. I do have one, and it's probably the most unusual one. It's a Chinese man. I got the idea a few years ago to write a story about in the 1860s, when they built the Transcontinental Railroad across our country. They employed some 30,000 Chinese people to build the end from San Francisco up to Promontory Point in Utah, that end of it. And what those people went through, and what they endured, and dynamiting through the Rocky Mountains and laying that whole story, what I learned was once they finished the railroad, they let 30,000 people go. Oh, we're done with you. Boom. And they're in the middle of an American desert, and very few of them spoke any English at all. And what happened to those 30,000 people that were dumped in the middle of the American desert back in 1869? And so it's based on history, but all the characters are fictional. So one of my favorite characters was the guy who went on to survive dealing with the Indians, dealing with the Irish raids that came shortly after that, because the Irishmen didn't like the Chinese because they thought they were taking their jobs. There were some awful massacres at that time. And so how this one Chinese man survived the hardship and came to, it didn't really thrive, but he survived it, and he survived it for himself and his family. And the sacrifice he made in the end for his family. So it's a fictional character,
Yes.
but it's a nice little story, I think. It has actually won one of the best screenplay awards that I've received.
Now, how did you make up this character? How did you create this person and his dialogue and everything?
People ask me that a lot, and it's so hard to explain. To me, it's like when I'm writing, it's like I'm watching a movie that I've never seen before, and what is that character going to be saying? And it comes somehow from here to here, and when I get started, I can't write fast enough. And these conversations with the villains, and the conversations and the betrayal that happens within, and the wink of the eye from the girl in the corner and things like that at the most unusual time, it just comes out. I wish there was a way to actually explain it. But when I get started, and my wife will attest to this, I'll sometimes go 36 hours on the computer and not sleep.
Not even a break at all.
Maybe not even eating. When I'm going, I'll take something
like
to drink.
It's being downloaded from the universe, isn't it?
Yes, it is, because I can't explain it, and it's just that I'm a movie buff, and I've always watched movies, and maybe my first couple of screenplays were a little Hollywood-ish, my first couple, but now it's a different thing that happens. It's just, and it's great, and it's exhausting, but it's just the catharsis. It's just phenomenal to get one out and say, wow, I did that. I wrote a musical a few years ago, a stage musical, and it's kind of a romantic adventure genre to that. But I wrote all the music, and I wrote all the parts, and one of the biggest thrills I think I've ever gotten is to watch, being an audience member, and watch a group of people, an orchestra and a group of people singing my songs, and the audience going crazy for it at the same time. It's just, I got standing ovations and triple bows, and that whole, it's just, there's no way to describe that feeling. It's like
now,
that all came from up
you said,
here.
and to watch them singing my songs, so you're also a songwriter. You write the
Yes.
songs for the screenplays.
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Now, do you write the music that goes to the words for the songs?
Well, that's another funny thing. Yes, I do. But I cannot read or write music. I don't know how.
But you hear it in your head.
I hear it in my head, and I play guitar. That's kind of, I don't play the piano, I just go, it goes like this, and it comes to me, and I play it. And I have a wonderful guy I work with, an arranger, and he goes, oh, that sounds great. Let's do this, this, and this with it. I said, that's fine. That's what you do. I'll do this part, and you fix it up. But I just, it all just comes from somewhere.
Now, do you find that when you work with somebody like this, a musical arranger, and you're around creative people like that, do you find that you become more creative?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the room, the juices that flow, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, the brainstorming and the sharing of ideas with other people, it's really powerful, isn't it?
It is. It's incredibly powerful. You know?
Yeah.
And I don't think that I have an ego to worry about, because if someone reads one of my things and they say, you know, that's really good, but what if you, I'm not one of these people to go, oh, no, I'm not going to change it now. I go, oh crap, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
You know, I look at it more like that.
Yeah.
And I employ ideas, particularly from my two sons, who are very creative in their brains. They say, that's great, Dad, except you should have done this and you should have done that.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. See, I love it when creative people get together and they share ideas, and I don't like it when somebody comes up to me and says, would you like a little constructive criticism? I want to say, no, I don't want criticism in any form. Take it over and give it to somebody who likes it. You know, I don't want that. But if they say, listen, you know, what you're doing is really good, and I have an idea I think it's going to make you even better.
Absolutely.
Whoa, yes. You
Absolutely.
know, I want them to share that with me.
The last thing I want is someone to placate me and just say, oh, that was wonderful. But no, I want them to say, you should have done this.
Yeah, you could be better if you did this.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of that. No, not at all.
No, I love it when people tell me how I could be even better. But now, here's the interesting thing I found out about you. I did some homework on the internet, and I found out you're also writing children's books.
Yeah, I just finished one, actually. Yeah, it's an idea that came. I have 6 grandchildren now, and an idea came to me out of another part of my past, which is really interesting, is I used to be a forest ranger. No, totally different roads, I know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And one thing when I was a forest ranger was I studied the birds and the trees and stuff for my own use. It wasn't really necessary for part of my job, but I was just curious about it. So I learned the name of every plant, and medicinal or otherwise, and every kind of creature that became what I did. So now that I've got some grandchildren, I said, you know what? How's a kind of a fun way for me to teach them this without sounding like a lecturer or you know, a botanist or something like that? So I wrote this little story, and it's called If You Were a Tree, What Kind of Tree Would You Want to Be?
Ooh.
And then I name all the different kinds of trees, and then it's, if you were a bird, what kind of a bird would you want to be? And then you go through the birds, and then I go through the reptiles and the flowers and all kinds of different, each page.
So it's very educational as well.
Yeah, but in a fun way.
What's the name of the book?
If You Were a Tree.
If You Were a Tree.
Yeah.
But you cover, if you were, a lot of other
Oh,
things
yeah,
as well.
every page has a different topic. If you were a seashell, if you were, you know, just if you were a cactus, or if just every page is a little bit different. And then you have the beautiful pictures of all the different ones, and then the last line on each inside page was, so which one would you like to be?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
So
It's
I'm
great.
working with a publisher out of New York City on that one.
For what age group?
I'm letting them decide that because they're the experts on that. But I think they're the, like 3 to 7 kind of range.
Yeah, it sounds like it. But on the other hand, even adults like me would like to learn about all the different kinds of trees or seashells or whatever, you know.
I even do like farm vegetables. If you were a vegetable, what kind of, would you be a tomato that grows on the vine, or would you be, you know, and they're all rhyming as the verses go.
How fun. Now, when is it coming out?
I have to check with those guys. You know, they just accepted it, and I don't know their timelines on that.
Oh, that sounds absolutely wonderful. I had a guest on my show a couple weeks ago, and she used to be well, I don't think you'd call her a showgirl. She was like a star of some of these major production shows around the world. She was in the Moulin Rouge in Paris, and in South Africa she was at the big resort at Sun City. And so she traveled around the world a lot, and she wrote a children's book called The Adventures of the Talking Traveling Trunk. And
cute.
it's about her trunk of all the stuff. But what's cool about the book is that the trunk got all over Europe. It was sent all over Europe. And along the way, she picked up souvenirs and put them in the trunk. And then the souvenirs started talking to each other. They became the characters. And the book is actually educating people about the different countries that the trunk traveled to.
Sure.
And she did a lot of research.
But through inanimate objects.
Yes.
That way.
Yeah, and she did tons of research on each of these European countries. And the book is like 600 and something pages.
Oh my.
Yeah,
oh
it's
my, it's a full book. No,
amazing.
mine's more of a picture book kind of
approach.
approach.
But you know what? People learn a lot from books.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think children's books are amazing because so many times as adults, we don't even know what they're learning in the children's book, like hers and like yours. You know, they're an excellent way to educate our children about the world and about the animals and the trees and all the botanicals that are out there. Yeah. So, where can people meet you if they've got a screenplay, a story for a great screenplay, and they want to contact you and say, hey, would you be interested in this idea?
Well, always at my website. It's ericpgranger.com.
ericpgranger.com.
I can tell you a cute little story of why I say Eric P. Granger instead of Eric
tell
Granger.
us the story. We want to know.
When I did my first book, the one about adventures and everything, the baby boomer's journey, or one baby boomer's journey, I was just getting ready to publish it on Kindle, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to check and just see if there's another Eric Granger out there that I wouldn't want to get confused with.
Right.
So I Googled that name, and lo and behold, there was a guy who was named Eric Granger who was making comic books of futuristic porn.
Oh,
So
no.
I decided I don't ever want to get confused with this other Eric Granger, because that would just ruin your career right away. So I added my middle initial. So everything that I do now.
Interesting that it's a P.
I know. My father's name was Peter, so and my middle name's Peter. So I know that's.
He should have had the Eric P. Granger.
So I just decided, just right from the beginning, when I was putting my name out there to the world, to do something just a little different, so it doesn't ever get confused with this person I've never met before.
That's a good idea. That's a very good idea, because you really don't want to be confused with that. No,
I don't.
not
The
at
last
all.
thing I want is to try the Oscar-winning screenplay and say, "Hey, are you the guy who writes those comic books?"
No. I know years ago, we have a show that comes to Vegas, an electronics show. It's called the Consumer Electronics Show. And I used to be in charge of all the personnel for all the booths and for the information and everything. And the Consumer Electronics Show decided to put in a whole section on pornographic films. They had them separated from everything else.
Yeah.
But one of the porn kings of the world was one of the clients that I had to furnish people for his booth and to make sure that they met with the regulations of the show and everything. And that was okay. But one day I was in the airport and he was in the airport and he goes, "Judy, how are you?" And I'm like, you know, I don't want anybody to know I knew the man. Not that they knew who he was or anything, but I was like, oh, I think I'll just crawl under my chair or something here. But no, you don't want to get, you
No,
don't
no,
want to be
no.
confused.
That's the reason I use that.
Yes, well, I'm very proud of you for changing that. It's been wonderful having you with us today.
Oh, my pleasure,
Thank
my
you
pleasure.
for being on our show. It's just really been a pleasure.
Oh, I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this show, this segment of Life Choices, and I hope you'll come back again soon for other Life Choices shows. And remember this, you must always make good choices. Choices. We have choices. They are the source of the success in our lives. When things happen to us, we can choose to believe they happened for a reason. We can discover opportunities in the most difficult experiences if we are willing to look for them. It is what we choose to think about each experience that determines how we respond to it. How we respond determines whether or not we find richer, more purposeful, more joyful lives. We are the only ones who can choose our attitudes and the principles that we live by. Choose well, my friends. Choose well.